Many thanks for choosing us. Let's begin with convener for the Fix the Country movement, Barker-Vormawor, who has been granted bail by a Tema High Court. The bail granted by Justice Daniel Mensah was to the tune of $2 million. The Cambridge University PhD student is to provide a surety of one of whom should deposit documents to his landed property in execution of the bail. The activist is facing treason felony charges after a social media post threatening a coup. This was the atmosphere at the Tema High Court after the ruling.
Let's go. We are all involved. We are all involved. We are all involved.
Correspondent Samuel Kwejo-Brace gives further details on today's proceedings and also engaged a member of the Fix the Country movement.
Barker-Vormawor, the bail that his lawyers were asking for. Now, the judge, his lordship, Daniel Mensah, said that after listening to all the arguments by counsels for both parties, he has come to the conclusion that it is not for Oliver Barker bail. He cited several sources. The case involving the Supreme Court judgment that made all cases bailable in Ghana. His passport, as we speak, is with the state, and he would need a passport to travel outside of Ghana. So it's difficult for you to argue that Oliver is a flight risk and therefore should be denied bail. The argument by the state that they cannot find landed properties belonging to him is something that he cannot continue to hold on to, because the lawyers of Oliver, prominent personalities in Ghana of high standing, who stand in surety for Barker-Vormawor, and that will make it difficult for anyone to argue that he will not avail himself if he should stand trial. Now, the judge said that for someone to be denied bail, it should be that he is someone that would not be standing trial. But since it's been proved that Oliver Barker-Vormawor would avail himself if he is called to stand trial, then of course his bail should be granted. So he was granted a bail of 2 million cedis with two sureties, one of whom should provide document to his landed properties within the jurisdiction of the court. I mean, the premises of the court was calm in the morning when we arrived. I saw Oliver Barker-Vormawor in high spirit. I didn't see him worried. And after court too, he was. I mean, once he's been granted bail, he was okay. But we had a lot of people being present in court. A majority members of his Fix the Country movement were in court this morning to solidarize with Oliver. I have one here with me to speak to. Gentlemen, good morning and thanks for joining us on Joy News. What's your name? Welcome. I'm Raphael Afro-Williams, but then popularly recognized fellow Ghanaians. Great. What do you make of what has happened in court this morning? We thank the court and the people of Ghana for them standing up, supporting Oliver Barker behind and even, in the court. Today we have seen the rule of law has really prevailed. Oliver Barker is a Ghanaian. We had, the court saying he doesn't have a permanent resident. It's not the court, it is the state. The state. The court is representing the state. No. The state has a lawyer that is arguing on its behalf, and the court is only listening to arguments. So the state, right? But Oliver Barker, from the allegations leveled against him by Abronye DC, he said Oliver Barker was working for the former government, right? The previous government. So that means Oliver Barker, the name comes from the voter. He is
He has been a Ghanaian. Okay, so when people try to say, oh, he's not a Ghanaian, he doesn't have a permanent residence in a whole place to make the right of protection by the Constitution.
You heard the judge pronounce in courtroom that he feels he has to make this pronouncement that no matter what the issue is, coup is not the option, and that we've been charged to protect the Constitution of this country, and therefore he urge you now on pronouncement on coup, because what it is, coup is not an option. What do you say to that?
Exactly. That is going on in Ukraine and Russia right now. Okay, we sitting back, we are not happy about it. Nobody waits for violence. But no citizen, apart from everything, you can see peace reigning here. Okay, so nobody wished for coup in this country. Oliver never wished for coup, and he has never wished for coup, and he's never going to wish for coup. Okay.
Well, the Supreme Court has also, in a unanimous decision, ruled that a case filed against the approval of government's budget on November 30 is moot. The court stated that its judgment that held that a deputy minister can vote, a deputy speaker can vote and form part of a quorum for decision-making while presiding over deals with this matter. Broadcaster Richard Delasky filed the case against the Attorney General challenging the decision by Deputy Speaker Joseph Wusu to vote in the determination that led to the approval of the budget when he presided over the affairs in the absence of the Speaker. Joseph Akablay joins us with more from the court. Joseph, we know he had filed two cases, one against the NDC MP's budget rejection and another against the NPP MP's approval. Bring us up to speed on what the court has been saying.
And so, Aisha, the court specifically dealt with the case that dealt with the approval of the budget on November 30. In fact, the other case which challenges Alban Babin and Parliament's rejection of the budget on November 26 remains outstanding. A couple of weeks ago, the court adjourned that case indefinitely, and so there's no clear path as to when that will be dealt with. But with regards to the approval of the budget on November 30, Richard Sky had argued that the Deputy Speaker should not have formed part of the quorum and also should not have participated in the said voting that resulted in the approval of the budget. Now, it's the view of the Supreme Court that this matter is moot because its decision in the Justice vs. Attorney General case, that decision held clearly that the Deputy Speaker of Parliament, while presiding, can form part of the quorum that will be used for a decision-making as well as reserve his voting right as well. And so the court said that that decision substantially addresses this particular matter, and it will be of no effect for it to make pronouncements on that November 30 case. And so that is the basis for the Supreme Court decision to describe this particular case as moot.
Joseph Akablay is our man following this matter for us at the Supreme Court. And to other stories, President Akufo-Addo is demanding the strengthening of existing African Union protocols on good governance to sanction civilians who manipulated their constitutions to extend their stay in power. For him, the condemnation and sanctions imposed on military juntas that overthrew elected governments may not achieve much unless the civilian heads of states are held accountable for their inactions that provide grounds for the overthrow. He was addressing an African Union Security Council dialogue on constitutional changes in the continent.
The reappearance of coups in Africa, in all its forms and manifestations, must be condemned by all, since it seriously undermines our collective bid to rid the continent of the menace of instability and unconstitutional changes in government, as currently defined by the frameworks enshrined in the Lomé Declaration, the Africa Charter on Democracy, Elections and Governance, and other important regional and continental instruments. Unconstitutional regime changes retard a country's growth. As much as the drivers are largely domestic, the international dimension cannot be overlooked. Foreign involvement in fomenting unconstitutional changes, often in favor of repressive governments, foreign economic interests, and other would-be geopolitical benefits, are contributory factors. Some foreign entities regard coups in Africa as a means of enhancing their regional ambitions. As such, they engage in all sorts of disinformation campaigns in a bid to disparage the authority of democratically elected governments and instigate opposition protests against incumbents. In implementing existing continental and regional instruments and protocols, defaulting member states are condemned and suspended from the activities of continental and regional bodies, and individual coup makers are sanctioned. However, the reality is these sanctions have not been applied uniformly. While we're quick to sanction military coup leaders, civilians who achieve similar ends via the manipulation of constitutions to remain in power, for example, go without sanctions, although their actions are clearly prohibited in our legal instruments. This means that the existing frameworks need to be strengthened to capture such infractions.
Joining me via Zoom for a better appreciation of the President's call is the former Senior Governance Advisor to the United Nations, Professor Barker-Vormawor. Good afternoon to you, sir. He's currently CEO of the Kufuor Foundation. I'm grateful for your time. Now, you share the President's view that the West is taking advantage of the weak protocols on good governance to destabilize the continent?
Forces have always been involved in the situations in Africa, instability in Africa, so that's not new. We all know that even in Nkrumah's overthrow was influenced to some extent, large extent, by the CIA. And other countries have been always meddling that affairs. But I think it boils down to one thing, and that's what I think the President also highlighted. It boils down to good governance in the country, for that matter, for Africa. Because coup makers may have their own selfish motives, their own parochial interest to organize a coup, but oftentimes they are provided the excuse by the nature of governance prevailing in the country. So bad governance has always been used as the excuse by soldiers to intervene in the political process. Of course, we know that the recent coups in the South region, for instance, in Burkina and Mali, it was the government's lack of responsiveness to a major security threat facing these countries. And when the soldiers asked for more arms to deal with these Islamist incursionists, the governments were unable to do so. So there may be various reasons, but I think the bottom line, and I think the President stressed it very strongly, is to look internally how governments conduct the affairs of state. So I agree in that respect with the President, even though we know that other countries, especially the superpowers, may always seek to meddle in affairs of countries such as ours.
What should change with regards to the AU protocols to be able to reverse this trend?
Frankly, I don't really know what should change, because whatever is changed still remains on the paper. It is how leaders in our various countries on the continent are prepared to rule by the law as indicated or as stipulated in their various constitutions. Look, the AU protocol has been there, ECOWAS declaration, as the President referred to the Lome declaration, human rights charters. We know all these things. That when a leader is in power and is not bothered by these protocols, then of course, the leadership can go on to do things that will ultimately lead to his own destruction. So for me, I'm not particularly interested in changing. It's a matter of getting good, responsible leaders. Leaders with a vision, leaders who are human-centered, leaders who are responsive to the needs of their people, and to ensure political efficacy. This is important. If you're a leader and you do not respond effectively to the desires of your people, then there will be a disconnect between the government and the people over whom the government is. And this has been a major issue that we confront. Finally, the issue of trust. Oftentimes, governments may come to power and they raise expectations as it should be, and people have full confidence in these governments. Yet, at some point on the line, they tend to lose confidence of the people because of the dropping of trust in the whole relationship between government and people. And as you know, trust is a political capital in governance, in good governance, I should say. So whenever trust between the ruler and the ruled is broken, that in itself also breeds serious challenges to the democratic process. So I'm saying that whilst I can understand that there should be protocols and all that, it boils down to the quality of leadership that we have in our various countries on the continent.
Now, Prof, I'm happy that you talk about the African leaders themselves who have a role to play in all of this. What should be the short, medium to long-term initiatives that should be taken by African leaders if the chairman's call is anything to go by?
Well, the call is good. And then again, we'll refer to the sovereign rights of various countries in the Union, the African Union in this case. If leadership are not willing to comply with the stated principles of good governance, it becomes difficult. You see, we all will want our governments to do well. The governments are there for the people. And if the government fails, or the trust between the government and the people breaks down, that's where the trouble begins. So if you ask me, what should be the initiatives? First, I believe that once you have a good government in place, you should also have a strong counterbalance through effective civil society work. That will ensure that the various organs of government, or governance in this case, are well protected, and that each institution has what it takes to fulfill its role in that kind of governance relationship. So when you see that in most African countries, constitutions have given the executives overwhelming power, then you tend to find situations where the executive overbears over the other organs of government, weakens these other institutions that I'm talking about, as you well know. So it's a matter of us having a leadership that is totally committed, selfless, totally committed to the democratic project. So when our president says, for instance, people should not stay beyond their tenure, he's right, because we have a trend in Africa where towards the end of their prescribed tenure, governments, some heads of state decide to find a way to manipulate their constitution to extend their stay. All these are things that lead to the ultimate breakdown of the democratic process, and that also undermines people's confidence in democracy. So democracy per se may have its own challenges, but I think to a large extent, it is leadership that tends to weaken the structure that we are putting in place, and that ultimately stirs the people. But having said all that, I agree totally with the president. The coup d'etats are not answers to the challenges that Ghana and other African countries have with democracy, because we have experienced so many coup d'etats, and if coup d'etats were able to develop countries, Ghana would have been one of the best developed countries, because we have suffered 5 of them. One of them lasting as long as 11 years. And we can go back and see whether any of these things have been anything better for the country. So I agree with the president that coups are not answers. But at the same time, it's also important for our leaders to understand that they have the responsibility not to give room for any military adventures to kind of interfere with the democratic process. And that assurance is only through how they rule their country, ensuring and abiding by the tenets of good governance. That's all of that.
But given the instability that these kinds of unrest bring to the countries, the AU itself has been accused of not being proactive. What's the role of the AU itself in achieving this?
Aisha, talking about the AU and its effectiveness is just like talking about the United Nations and its complete ineffectiveness when it comes to the breakdown of international security. Like what we are witnessing in is a Russian war in Ukraine. The United Nations have been rendered completely useless, if I should use the word, because the UN is as effective as its members want it to be. In the same way, the AU is just a collective of sovereign nations, and each head of these nations still retain their sovereignty. So if the AU wants to be effective, it will mean that member states will have to cede some amount of power to the central organization, the body, the AU in this case, to take certain decisions that are binding. As we speak, you know that AU can only pronounce, we can only communicate certain concerns. The AU, without the full approval of its member states, in this case, the heads of states, cannot, for instance, decide to march into any country. So it's a very kind of dicey situation, I should say, when it comes to serious insecurities and how the body can deal with it. So I think if we want the AU to be effective, to be relevant to this kind of matters, they will have to be thinking of what Parliament Thomas said years, decades ago, that we need a unified government where one central government of the continent can give marching orders and soldiers will follow. Until we get to that level, it's very, very difficult for the organization to be as effective as we want it to be.
I'm grateful for your time, Professor Ajimandria. He is a former UN advisor. I'm grateful for your time. Now, the Civil and Local Government Staff Association Ghana is demanding the immediate withdrawal of the appointment of Madam Henrietta Lamte as head of the Birth and Death Registry. Describing the development as unlawful and in breach of the Civil Service Act, the president of CLOGSAG, Dr. Evans Agbeme Jikum, said they will resist the appointment, saying the appointee, apart from holding dual citizenship, also was done without recourse to the Civil Service Council.
On the political appointment of the registrar, Birth and Death Registry. As its meeting held on Friday, 11th March 2022, having noted the unlawful appointment of a non-civil servant to replace a civil servant who was acting as the registrar, the improper instruction from the Minister of Local Government and Rural Development to the acting registrar to prepare handing over notes and hand over to Madam Henrietta Lamte within 10 days. The hurried manner in which Madam Henrietta Lamte was introduced by the Deputy Minister of Local Government and Rural Development to the staff of the registry before the deadline for the handing over. The stance that under Section 8 of Act 1027, a district office of the registry is a department of the district assembly. The district assembly is part of the local government structure. Therefore, the Birth and Death Registry is part of the civil service and the local government service. That under Article 195 of the 1992 Constitution of Ghana, the power to appoint persons to hold or act in an office of the public services shall vest in the President, acting in accordance with the advice of the Governing Council concern given in consultation with the Public Services Commission. The blatant disregard for procedures of appointments into the civil service and the local government service, as well as the neutrality principle, are unwarranted and regrettable. The position of Registrar of Birth and Death Registry per Act 1027 should be occupied by a person with relevant academic qualifications, experience, and knowledge in civil registration. Hereby resolves, and as resolved, that the political appointment of the Registrar of Birth and Death should be reversed. The government should, as a matter of urgency, bring sanity to the Birth and Death Registry. Should this attempt fail, CLOGSAG shall use any means whatsoever at its disposal to rectify the situation at the Births and Deaths Registry.
The Trade and Industry Minister Alan Kyerematen is blaming the Finance Ministry for government's inability to disburse interest loans to pharmaceutical companies captured under the One District, One Factory initiative. Last year, government announced the disbursement of a total amount of 260 million Ghana cedis as interest subsidies for 128 companies, arguing the move is to reduce the risk of financial loss for the companies. But pharmaceutical companies are yet to receive their share of the money. Answering a question on the floor of the House, Mr. Kyerematen observed the delay could also be due to late application of funds. We can go live to Parliament for some reaction and speak with my colleague, Kwesi Parker-Wilson. Parker, I'm grateful that you are bringing us updates. What are the reactions from members of Parliament from this revelation by the Trades Minister?
Aisha, particularly the minority is unhappy with the explanation given by the Trade and Industry Minister. They think that there's some level of discrimination as far as the disbursement of these interest loans are concerned. And so they want the minister and the minister 260 million to these companies. And one key concern by the minority is that if you look at the statistics, some companies are receiving more funds than the others. And it's something that they wanted to know why the ministry has decided to grant to more companies more funds than the others. But the explanation from the Trade and Industry Minister is that the company just apply, and if the banks are able to raise the funds for them, then they do that. So they did not necessarily have control over how much is being given to a specific company. But that has also been rejected by the minority. And in fact, Muntaka Mubarak actually indicated even 10 million Ghana cedis, all the other companies will equally receive same. But that was a bit of a disagreement between him and the majority side when the majority raised concerns about capacity, because some of the companies are of bigger capacity with more employees than the other companies. So it cannot be the same that they should be given the same amount of money. So that has been, in fact, he's been dragged on the floor of the House for quite about close to 2 hours, answering questions in his ministry with regards to 1D1F and the fact that the Commander Sugar Factory has received 10 million cedis from the Exim Bank, and yet they're not seeing anything as far as the company is concerned. So these are some of the things that have been happening on the floor. Now, Aisha, away from the floor, this afternoon, we are hearing that a rightful group is a group we are told has concerned about the safety of their members. They don't want their identity to be shown on television and on cameras. And so they've asked the committee to have mercy upon them and grant them an opportunity in camera for them to advance their argument against the anti-gay bill. So the committee we are learning this afternoon that has given them the opportunity. And so within next week, they will meet them and they will advance the argument against the anti-gay bill. So these are some of the things happening within the President of Parliament today.
Kwesi Parker-Wilson is our man in Parliament. We sure will bring you updates from Parliament in our subsequent bulletin. Now, away from Parliament, elected polling station executives of the MPP in the Jiso constituency marched through the principal streets in the area early Wednesday in the attempt to justify the polling process. There have been calls for nullification of the election over claims of irregularities, but the elected executives say such move will create division within the party. We'll bring you details of all of this in our subsequent bulletins. Right now, let's take a break. When we'll return, there is the very latest coming from the world of business.
Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to Business. My name is Darryl Kwao. The Ghana Exim Bank has hinted of preparedness to help achieve a national export development strategy, which would be targeted at increasing earnings in non-traditional exports. According to the Deputy Chief Executive Officer of the Ghana Exim Bank, Rosemary Beryl Archer, the bank will partner other important export institutions locally in achieving this feat.
Speaking at the Ghana Exim Bank Stakeholders Consultative Forum on Export Trade, the bank called on the government to impose export levies on products such as cashew to prevent its exportation in the raw state. This, according to them, will compel local producers to process some of their produce before.
The National Export Development Strategy, which is set to run from 2020 to 2029, is envisaged to increase our earnings in non-traditional exports from $2.8 billion in 2010 to $25.3 billion by 2029. I want to assure you, the Ghanaian export community, of our preparedness to play a major role towards achieving this target. We are indeed confident that these will stimulate your growth and offer the needed impetus to ace the foray into international markets, enabling you to compete favorably and profitably.
Deputy Minister of Trade and Industry Herbert Krapa called for more energy to be channeled into increasing the country's export, as he says that's the best way of addressing most of the fundamental issues facing the economy.
Today, no thanks to COVID-19, economies the world over are struggling. Economic activity has stagnated and supply chains have been disrupted. The effect of this was stated. If the gains we have made in the export trade sector are to be consolidated and the frontiers of our industrial transformation agenda furthered, then this approach is one to take and taken seriously.
The Exim Bank is also proposing certain interventions by way of diversification of the cocoa sector.
An authority is in the process of establishing a standardized manual for training commercial drivers and those who carry heavy goods. The move is to ensure safe transportation of goods across the country and reduce carnage on the roads. Deputy Director in charge of driver testing and training, Kafui Semevor, disclosed this to Joy Business after certifying some driving examiners at the head office in Accra. Here's more.
The examiners program for 50 officers from the Driver and Vehicle Licensing Authority is part of the roadmap to ensure that a standardized certification is developed for commercial and heavy-duty vehicles. The move will ensure that transported goods reach their destination safely. Deputy Director in charge of driver testing and training, Kafui Semevor, is confident that the standard manual for this category of drivers will promote professionalism on the road.
Now, what we have just done means that apart from these authorized officers, no other person in the authority is allowed to test such category of drivers. But it's an ongoing process. More officers will be trained. The next stage is the standardizing the manual for training of the drivers themselves. And this process will soon end, and then there will be an established base for training those category of drivers. When that is done, it means that anytime anybody is issued a license to models of training before that person is granted a license or the privilege to use our roads. So in short, that is the essence of this.
So in simple. Speaking at the event, Chief Executive of the DVLA, Akwesi Ajimambuzia, reminded heavy goods carting drivers of their critical role in assisting traders and businesses get access to items.
You have to be a very good driver. You need to remain alert for long periods of time, which may be easier said than done. Frankly, it is a tall order for many. You have to have a very keen eye on road safety and regulations, have a complete understanding of that as an examiner. You also have to be able to work independently as an operator, have a responsible attitude, and to be able to cope with stressful and demanding situations. Yours is a call to duty to help with training people who assist with commerce and who do well to protect life and indeed save lives.
The authority is expected to roll out these programs
on a plan to cushion consumers against the rising fuel prices. It's likely consumers will pay more at the pumps today following warning by the oil marketing companies. Prices of the commodity may hit an all-time high. They project between 10 and 11 cedis a litre for petrol and diesel, due primarily to the weak cedi. Head of Communications at GPRTU, Abbas Moro, says they will increase transport fares again if fuel prices cross the 10% mark that allows for automatic adjustment by transport operators.
If we don't do that, I mean, we can't sustain our industry. So definitely, if the window hits anywhere above the 10%, we will also have to adjust our fares and make sure we meet the demands to help and serve our people well.
Well, Deputy Energy Minister Andrew Ejapa-Mensah says government is alarmed about the impact of the fuel price increases on consumers and will intervene shortly.
It's not a Ghana-specific problem. Indeed, I'm sure that if you monitor the airwaves, you would see that prices at the pumps in the United States, in the UK, Europe, generally, Africa, is all going up. And governments across the world are responding, of course, depending on the strength of each individual state, with the appropriate response to cushion their consumers. I can confirm to you that that conversation has already commenced here. Government is very much sensitive of the issues and is working to ensure that some cushioning is provided.
And that's business. More coming up on the marketplace at the top of the hour. Up next, sports.
Let's do sports now on Joy News Today with me, Muftau Nabila Abdullah. Deputy Director General of the National Sports Authority, Bao Majid, says the Cape Coast Sports Stadium will be ready by March 20 to host the World Cup qualifier playoff between Ghana and Nigeria. He was speaking on PM Express on Tuesday.
We went to Cape Coast, this academy at Right to Dream Academy, to come and assist the green grass technology so that they can recover the pitch within time to enable Ghana play at Cape Coast. So that was the purpose for which we were there. And what we saw, I'm not a technical person, so the verdict about the state of the pitch, whether it will be ripe for the game on Friday, 25th, that is for the technical people to decide. But I've seen a lot of improvements on the pitch. The pitch has really recovered. If you look at the pictures that you shown earlier and what we saw yesterday, there's a tremendous improvement on the pitch. And if what they are telling us is anything to go by, then the pitch could be ready by 20th.
And reports just coming in right now says that the Bawayara Sports Stadium is going to be the venue to host. Joy Sports Sources has just confirmed about a couple of minutes ago. Let's talk about the Accra Sports Stadium, where the Electricity Company of Ghana has disconnected power to that facility. My colleague Michelle Queno has the rest of the story.
The National Task Force of the Electricity Company of Ghana, ECG, has cut power supply to the Accra Sports Stadium over a debt to the tune of 508 Ghana cedis. Nana Shadrach Mays, who is the team lead of the task force, confirmed to Joy Sports that the debt was accrued over a 10-month period. Per Shadrach Mays, the management of the stadium will be without power supply, so management makes a 75% payment of the total debt. He further informed that ECG have not received any assurance that the stadium's debt is going to be met.
They have to pay about 1/4 or let's say about 75% of the debt that they are owing, and then the rest will be scheduled for them. So what they have to do is see the RCM of Accra. He will put them into the schedule. No assurances have been given as we left the place. But if effort is being done by their side, the officers in charge of the schedule, the debt schedule will inform us so that we'll go in and then report our for them.
The Accra Sports Stadium serves as the home grounds for Premier League sides Accra Great Olympics and Hearts of Oak. The Phobians, currently sixth on the table, will engage Ash Gold on Sunday. But before then, the national under-20 women's team will play Ethiopia in the second leg of their Women's World Cup qualifier, and both teams risk playing at the Accra Sports Stadium without any power supply from ECG.
And that's your sports for now, but we do have more sports stories on my joyonline.com, including the breaking news coming in. Bawayara Sports Stadium will be the host for Ghana versus Nigeria World Cup qualifier playoff. We have details of that story on my Joy Online. Up next is World News.
Time now for Showbiz, and budding musician Roy X Taylor, who is also the son of veteran musician Ebo Taylor, disclosed that people find it hard to approach him because of how huge his father's brand is. In an interview with Andy Dosty on the Daybreak Hits on Hits FM, the singer said investors who want to approach him are sometimes scared because they feel he is surrounded by so many music policies.
Sometimes.
Really?
Yeah. Like, sometimes people want to bring some offer, but they think my father is a big brand and they find it a bit difficult to approach because they think I'm surrounded with too much musical policies, but that's not the issue.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a new guy and I'm ready for business, I'm ready for work, so they should consider me to be myself.
Meanwhile, the musician has debunked rumors he is arrogant. He said he loves criticism because it helps shape him.
Oh, and I like it when people try to, put things in the right place, or when people try to criticize, or so it makes me learn a lot. That was my first time. I think a lot of I can say, like. People were stressing on what I said and sharing opinions. So I'm glad I learned a lot from that scenario.
Yeah. A lot of the comments.
Opinion. Yeah, I wasn't speaking for all music lovers. It was opinion and a pleasure given to me to speak about the fact that he saved her life or he patronage. I like the fact that he patronage, but entirely he did not save it because most of the musicians we're also doing the same thing.
And that'll be it for Showbiz. That'll be it also for Joy News today. My name is Aisha Ibrahim. Many thanks for watching. For more news, just log on to myjoyonline.com. Over there, you get updates of all the developing stories and everything news. Do enjoy the rest of our programs.